A growing crisis among active duty military members and veterans, many taking their own lives. On Monday, a veteran killed himself outside this Veterans Affairs hospital in Cleveland, the fourth veteran suicide at a VA facility just this month.
I knew that I had to decide to get on dying or get on living.
Army veteran Eric Donahoe was on the front lines in Iraq. In 2015, he was on the precipice.
That led me to my kitchen table in December of 2015 with my Glock in my mouth trying to pull the trigger.
Donahoe has lost 14 military buddies to suicide.
The VA prescribes an obscene amount of opiates to veterans, and in that, veterans are also drinkers. And so when you combine those two and you add depression to the mix, you know, you're creating a pretty bad scenario for veterans.
The VA secretary knows much more needs to be done.
It's a question of changing the culture, and we have probably done a better job of that than any other health system. I say we're treating the pain, not the brain, with opioids.
President Trump has ordered new efforts on suicide prevention.
Veteran suicide is a tragedy of staggering proportions.
In the active duty ranks, there were 231 suicides in the first 9 months of 2018 compared to 203 during the same time the year before. Almost as alarming, Marine Corps Commandant General Robert Neller says most of those never saw combat.
Last year, we had the highest number of Marines take their own lives.
Even with all the effort, some 20 veterans still take their lives every day.
With the amount of effort and resources that we're putting towards the problem, we're really not making a dent.
Marine Corps suicides reached a 10-year high last year in the special operations community. Suicides tripled, and over the recent Easter holiday, 5 service members took their own lives.
That is horrific. You know, I mean, 20 per day?
20 per day.
And then they're talking about most of these people that are committing suicide have never even seen combat.
That's right.
Yeah. So I tell you, we, Colonel Arnold, Dr. Arnold, Damon Arnold, of course, one that we all know.
Sure.
But he's sick today, so that's what he didn't. He's not here, but we would be talking to him. Who wants to respond to that at all? This is horrific.
You know, it's very curious that I'd like to know how many veterans we have. What's the pool when we say 20 a day, and what's the general population, and what, you know, how do you account for that? I mean, if you've got people who are not in combat,
right.
Of course, it doesn't take combat to have PTSD or some of these conditions. You can just witness certain things, but I don't know how that shakes out, because if you're not in really stressful situations. Why is that?
And
what
getting
do you attribute
worse.
that to? And getting
worse per year.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the research that comes out, that's been put out in the last maybe decade or so, is showing that a lot of the people that are committing suicide are not even active or active duty service members. They're people from previous wars, previous conflicts. The stereotype is that you have the Afghanistan or Iraq veteran who's the one committing suicide, who's just come back from a tour of duty. A lot of times, as years go by, these demons that have been carried around in people's heads are what actually are driving people to finally take that step.
But if they weren't in combat, let's say you take somebody who's in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they were non-combat personnel. Why would, what demons would come back? I mean, I think a lot of research needs to be done.
When you think about this going through the military process, excuse me, when you think about this going through that military process of being dehumanized to be turned into a soldier or to a Marine, that process within itself can do a lot of damage to the psyche. And then when you go into a civilian environment, now you have to change from being a soldier back into being a person. And there's no transition process for that.
I know what you're saying, but sometimes the come back when you get home might be more serious.
Because
what we have now.
And I'd like to look at, because when I was in the service in when I went in January '68, it was a lot tougher than it was than what the Army's like. I mean, you got hit by your sergeants, you got thrown on the ground, you got. It was lot more dehumanizing, if you will, those getting ready to go to Vietnam and so forth. And even, I would say, prior years also was a lot tougher than it is now. I don't think, they get nice barracks and this and that. And
It's not. It's more than that. It's more than just the barracks and the uniforms.
Let's get a female viewpoint.
Well, what
Rochelle,
you have to remember is that sometimes they go into the military already with trauma.
Yeah,
so
that's
then
true.
Maybe that's why they went in the
triggered-
military.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, because there's a lot of young people who were in foster care,
Right.
who were in, the systems, and so they take that with them when they go, and then they make it through the first part of it, but then the second part of it, when I say the first part, they go through the basic training, they go through all of those types of stimulating exercises and activities, getting oriented into the military. But then as they move on to the next level, they run into a lot of more challenges. One, because they're younger, you have to look at that too. And then there's a lot of strains in the military.
And there may have been
There
a
is
crack. There
something-
might have been a crack in the armor to begin with.
Let me say this though: we
Sometimes.
got it. We can't. At least we have to acknowledge
Yeah.
the fact that there's help.
Yeah.
Hopefully, House Bill 2333 is a good step to helping curb veteran suicide. This is a bipartisan support for Suicide Prevention Coordinators Act. That's the official name of the act, introduced by Representative Anthony Beninci, a Democrat from New York, and co-sponsored by Representatives Jim Banks, who is a Republican from Indiana, and Mike Bost, who is a Republican from right here in Illinois.
Downstate.
And yeah, exactly, downstate. And so this was written by Natasha Standen. He says, as a woman who served 3 tours, I breathed a sigh of relief seeing Congress step up and take action to begin to address our nation's worsening crisis of not properly treating veterans with PTSD, which has led to an epidemic of suicide.
You know what? I am not going to applaud that. Number one,
Okay.
because this is 2019. This has been going on for a very long time. And that is just a response from, if you will remember, not long ago, the money that they did not spend in order to do community work to help veterans. So that's just a Band-Aid to what they should have been doing all along.
But Rochelle, isn't it a good thing now to try to do something about it? It
It
should have
breaks
been done
my
earlier.
heart.
We know
it
that.
breaks my heart because
Yeah.
if you look back at the ones, in the last couple of years, I mean, what didn't we learn from that? We should have done that beginning in Vietnam. All this stuff
I
has
totally
been
agree
out
with
here.
you,
It's
Rochelle, but
prevalent.
I don't want to say because we haven't done it then.
I know.
I'm just glad
just saying,
you've got this is a
this is
bipartisan
something they should
bill.
do. That's what we elect them to do.
Yes.
We elect them to do those things.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the thing is, there's so many factors involved. I think there has to be, more research. I'd like to know what the suicide rate was, during World War II, those vets, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, so forth, and what their MOSs were, how much time elapsed, was it while they were on active duty, 3 years after, 4 years I think there has to be a lot of research and a
But
lot
the thing
of
is,
data
but there is a lot of data
compiled.
out there
and
that
they
actually
need that.
shows that most
Yeah.
of the vets that commit suicide are not from the current conflicts. The majority of the veterans that are committing suicide are from prior to Iraq and Afghanistan, prior to Operation Desert Storm. So this is a problem that, like Rochelle was talking about, that's been brewing for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, nobody really took PTSD seriously. That didn't come into the word term PTSD didn't even come into the 80s and 90s.
Well, they call it shell shock,
Shell shock,
and then
right.
battle
Right.
fatigue
Right.
later.
Right.
Battle fatigue in World
And
War
I
II.
take
They
it from
refer
a
to.
personal standpoint of me working with people who have committed suicide, who worked at the VA hospital, who worked at the regional office. They were Vietnam veterans. So this is not just something that just
No,
came
it's not,
along.
and I understand
You know,
your
and I just
concern,
do-
and I totally
Yeah,
agree with you. But
yeah.
I do not like the fact that you seem to be putting
Yeah.
down the fact that you've got a bipartisan
Because
bill,
I'm mad
Rochelle.
about it, I'm
You're mad about it, but
emotional.
let's do better. Let's do better.
If they wanna do
I mean,
better-
let's not. That's what the bill is all about.
No, and I understand that, and
Okay.
I'm happy about the bill. That's
Yeah, okay,
good.
well,
but it's
I'm
a-
glad
it's-
you said that,
it's
'cause
right, because but
Eddie
it's
Reed-
some lives too late.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well-
It's good for
We can't-
okay. You
Eddie
put it
Reed
on
said earlier
paper.
the windshield's
Hold on.
bigger than the
you
back.
put it on
Yes.
paper, but
For a
then
reason. Let's go
okay,
forward.
if we're gonna do that, then let's start working in the community because
Right.
the VA cannot do this by themselves.
Right, exactly.
That's the other
All
thing.
I'm saying
and
is
they're
that Bill
understanding that.
2333 is a good step to helping curb veteran suicide. That's
Okay.
And whatever else we do, that's great too.
Yeah.
Okay, 312-374-8130 is our number. Let's take a call. Brother Hall, how you doing?
Hello.
Hi, Brother Hall. How you doing?
Hey,
Good,
Cliff,
good.
and to your guest.
Yes.
I normally just sit back and relax and listen, but today I had to call in because, one, I know the governor is still listening. Thank you for all that you've done,
That's great.
Governor Ryan.
Great.
But, Cliff, let me also say this,
Yeah, sure.
and to your guest point. She said something that if we're going to do that, maybe we need to hit the street and, in other words, have a holistic approach to this piece. And I totally agree. Because as I'm in the Valley of the Dry Bones, and you know, Cliff, I feed, right?
Yes.
My wife and I. I'm seeing more veterans, brother. I'm seeing more veterans under the viaducts on these corners.
Right.
And I just think it's terrible. It's a shame that someone who have fought for our country. I'm not a veteran, okay, but I can imagine, man. You know, you go overseas or wherever you went, and those who have not fought but enlisted into the military, you know, and then to come back here to deal with your people that won't even take care of you. What about the discrimination that they went through probably when they were there and then come home to face the same thing? So I think we do need to step up our game, particularly for the veterans. I think we need to step up our game, just like they had a 1 Million Man March. We need to think on something in terms of to shine more light on the veterans. And I'm going to hang up and listen to your distinguished guest.
Okay.
Because this is really one hell of a show.
Thank you.
And then lastly, let me say this.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how you do this show with that super producer that you have, Glenda. Man, we love her, man. Thank you so much for,
Thank you, Brother Hall.
producing it. All right, my brother.
You might have to repeat that. She's not in the room right now.
Listen, yeah, she heard it.
She heard it.
Let me say this before we take the next caller. You know, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. You don't have to be a veteran.
No,
you can. It's a psychiatric condition.
That's right.
It's people who experience or witness a traumatic experience, like a natural disaster. Doesn't have to be combat. A serious accident.
In certain neighborhoods in Chicago.
Right, damn right.
Well, that's
what I said earlier.
But you touched on something serious because people actually, there's a lot of movements, and even one of the aldermen in Chicago is actually putting a study together or putting an initiative to address PTSD in Southside Chicago, black neighborhoods because of gun violence.
Non-military PTSD.
Civilians.
Yeah.
Let's
go to another 312-374-8130. Let's take our next caller. Ruth, how are you?
Yes,
hi, Ruth.
hi.
Good. Thanks for calling, dear.
Okay, during the earlier wars, conflicts, there was a united front. The soldiers, the general population, they were, for the most part, involved in whatever the issue was. Now, when they return, the general population, for the most part, don't have a clue where they've been, why they've been there, etc. Could that have something to do with the psychic of these men who have been trained to be soldiers when their home front is not involved in what they're involved in? And I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay, thank you for your call, Ruth. Well, that certainly was the situation in Nam, for sure. I mean, that it was terrible, and one of the greatest things I saw then was the parade that happened downtown Chicago. Yeah, that was